Opening day is always a zoo, but everybody in town wanted to be able to say they were there the day baseball returned to Washington. I talked to 5 senators, elected, 3 congressmen, Duke Ziebert, the restaurant guy, Linda Carter, who used to be Wonder Woman, and Dick Bosman, who started the last game at RFK 18 years ago and learned belatedly the aerodynamic impact of tears on a major league fastball. Bosman gave up 5 runs and 8 hits in 5 innings that night, including 3 home runs, all of which he chalked up to tears. Still, the Senators were winning 7-5 with 2 outs in the top of the 9th when the last crowd to see Major League Baseball in Washington raged onto the field and refused to let the game end. Jim Honachek, the umpire, declared a forfeit at 10:11 p.m., and with that, Washington surrendered its right to be called a Major League city. Then, last year, the Reverend Jimmy Boy Collins cut a deal to throw his considerable religioso support in the direction of a particular right-wing presidential candidate, the quid being a promise of an expansion franchise should said candidate get elected. The candidate is now President of these United States, as Jimmy Boy likes to say, and the Reverend Collins is owner of the Washington Senators. He calls his born-again Nats a divine reincarnation. Everybody figured when and if Washington got another team, it would be a National League franchise, what with the Birds in Baltimore. But the American League expanded first, and the president kept his promise, using his influence to get Jimmy Boy the franchise after the initial ownership went under. Jimmy Boy is also founder of the Christian Fellowship Entertainment Network, the slogan of which is Jesus Rocks 24 Hours a Day, and Superstars Ministry, a Christian outreach program aimed at the spiritual needs of athletes. Jimmy Boy says that of all God's children, ball players are the most tempted, the most fallen, and the most needy of getting right with the Lord. On this much we agree. He also believes that ball players will be the vehicle by which the gospel of Jesus Christ is proclaimed worldwide, sports being the one thing, other than Jesus, we all have in common. This is why he bought the Washington Senators. My mission is to suit 'em up, save 'em, and start 'em in the Lord's all-star lineup. I'll never forget the first time I met him. This was last winter, just after I got the beat. He kept me waiting in his office at RFK for a half hour. Leaving a reporter alone in your office is a stupid thing to do. I made sure to check out the place. There was a Bible open to Hebrews, with chapter 12, verse 1 underlined, a platinum record from Jimmy Boy's former career as Christian rocker, and a baseball autographed by all the newly signed born-again members of the 1989 Washington Senators. There was also this smell. Like Muzak in an elevator, it was everywhere, and it was awful. It smelled as if somebody had poured a bottle of Chanel No. 5 on a pair of sweat socks after a doubleheader, and then boiled them with onions and cloves. After 10 minutes, my head was pounding. After 20, I was beginning to gag. By the time Jimmy Boy wafted into the room, I was in tears. "Like my new cologne?" he said. "Clubhouse, it's called. I feel perhaps it will help me get closer to the boys." We got along fine as long as I breathed through my mouth and didn't try to interrupt or leave. When I finally got up to go, 3 hours later, he grabbed my hand and held it till my knuckles cracked. His palm was clammy, his voice soft but urgent. "A.B., I want you to consider the man, Jesus Christ, who he was and what he says. Either he is who he says he is, or I'm wasting my life." I told Jimmy Boy I was sure he wasn't wasting his life, but probably he was wasting his time where the Lord and I were concerned. He said, "I'll pray for you, A.B." There wasn't much he could do about the Senators' roster except pray. He actually told me in spring training, the meek will inherit the outfield. Trust me, it's on tape. So Jimmy Boy put his heart and soul into the locker room. A year ago, this clubhouse was a storage space called the Elephant Room, where visiting football players went to get high before playing the Skins. When the renovations began, workmen dug up all sorts of Senators' memorabilia, scorecards, pennants, even an old usher's uniform, number 6, which now hangs behind glass outside the administrative offices. The Elephant Room was a regular archaeological find, all right. Buried inside were the hopes and dreams of the faithful. It's hard to know what to call the present accommodations, which, according to the 1989 Washington Senator's Media Guide, are covered with 240 square yards of plush Dacron polyester custom-made Stars and Stripes 2-inch pile. The ceiling is stenciled with amber waves of grain, and over the door to the showers is a trompe-l'oeil rendering of Mount Rushmore. "Unbe-fucking-leavable," Monk said the first time he saw it. Monk is the manager. He is also a very religious man. The players hold court on these little Naga-hide thrones, separated by red, white, and blue chain-link fence. Their names are inscribed above in gold leaf. Number 36, Senator Stick Fuller, D.H., and so on. Over the doorway there's a plaque that says, "In God We Trust." Somebody inserted the words, "and his fastball," after God, which Rump says sort of puts the Almighty in his place. Rump is the catcher, and my best source on the team. Hell, he's everybody's best source on the team. He's what sports writers call a talker, which means he's a godsend. Rump is a guy who can find nuance in every 6-4-3 double play. A one-man Greek chorus. The conscience of the game. He is also a perennial all-star on the downside of a Hall of Fame career. His locker occupies a place of honor just inside the clubhouse door, beside the bulletin board, where everything of importance that he doesn't say is posted for general consumption. An hour before the game, Rump and I were standing by the bulletin board reading a story from yesterday's Boston Globe, predicting that Roger Clemens would open the season by tossing a no-hitter, the weather and the Senators' lineup being what they are. Underneath it were the words, "No-hitter my ass," and underneath that, in smaller letters, were the words, "Unless he's good shit." I was too busy laughing to hear the crackle of the Secret Service man's walkie-talkie and the cackle of Jimmy Boy Collins announcing, "Ladies and gentlemen, the President of these United States." A flying wedge of blue suits and earpieces surged across the threshold, knocking me on my ass and scattering the A-list right quick. Jimmy Boy had been bragging for days that the President of these United States would show for a pre-game prayer session. Of course, no one believed him. No president has set foot in RFK since Jimmy Carter. The special presidential elevator, with the buttons 2, 3, P4, and the special presidential holding room have been mothballed. People have been skeptical about Jimmy Boy's predictions ever since he issued a press release on the first day of spring training, guaranteeing that the Lord God will raise up the Nats into first place by September 14th. Rump has been wearing a September 14th t-shirt ever since. Anyway, there is some debate about what happened next. All I remember is the look on the president's face when he saw Stein standing over an 80-pound pastry likeness of Old Glory, courtesy of Duke Siebert, with a fungo bat in his hands and a twisted look in his eyes. "Yar-ha!" Stein said. You have to understand a little bit about Stein. Until a couple of years ago, he was known primarily around the league as the founder of Jewish Jocks for Jesus, the JJJ. Not that Stein is religious. I wasn't even sure he was Jewish until he announced he wouldn't play on Passover. He started the whole thing to aggravate Lawson, who was otherwise known as Brother John. Stein and Lawson have more in common than you'd think. They share first base and ex-wives, whom they traded back when they played in Milwaukee, where Stein said there was nothing else to do. Soon after, Brother John got religion, and Stein got himself a Jewish Jocks for Jesus t-shirt. Stein is as vain as he is sacrilegious, and worships only at the Temple of Stein. Every day you can find him flexing his triceps in front of the clubhouse mirror. Last year he was voted best white body in baseball, which is why the brothers call him White Body when they aren't calling him Dickhead. I overheard Demetrius and Mugshot talking about him one day in spring training. They are outfielders, and 2 of our 7 colored men of color, as Jimmy Boy calls them. Demetrius says to Mugshot, "What you call a white boy with a good body?" Mugshot takes a minute to think about this. His real name is Michael, but everyone calls him Mugshot because of his cheerful demeanor and the 5-year hitch he served for armed robbery, the majority of which he spent memorizing Webster's 3rd New International Dictionary. Nowadays he tries to use 40 syllables whenever one would do. After careful consideration of the question, Mugshot says, "Experientially wise and tangentially wise, I calls him unusual." "Must be some blood in there somewheres," Demetrius agreed. Stein said it was the nicest thing anyone ever said about him. Now he thinks he's a black, born-again Jewish samurai. He's been hell on